We're good.
Good morning, everyone. We are going to kick off day 2 of our May 2019 board meeting in beautiful Gunnison, Colorado. Today, a point of housekeeping, we're going to start with item 25, which are the Basin Director's reports. We'll have our morning break. And then before item 26, we will be taking a vote on the items that were removed from the consent agenda yesterday, which were items 1A, 1B, and 1C from the consent agenda. So that's how we will be proceeding. We will start off with 25A, which is our Colorado River Main Stem Director's report. Director Schwartz.
Actually, no, we're supposed to have a director's report prepared this time. So I thought I'd show you some. Oh, wait.
You can advance
Okay.
slide with that button.
But super, thank you. So we have some great snow pictures, as you might imagine. We probably are going to see a lot of that today, but this is some backcountry skiing up the Castle Creek Basin. And you can see on Mother's Day that there's ample snow closing our skiing, and Art Burrows and some friends, some local mountaineer guys were up there enjoying the weather. And so it's really, really something when you look at these photographs and how much snow we have. But then also you look at what kind of devastation is certainly the avalanches, and what a historic avalanche cycle we saw, and what that has done to areas that, historically may not have experienced the avalanches, and contending with these new snow patterns, and also contending with the avalanche records. And here's gorgeous, Mount Sopris, which looks like you're in the Himalayas. I mean, to see the amount of snow sitting there at 150% or so is really a pretty iconic view, certainly in the Roaring Fork Valley, where I am. And then this is the Roaring Fork River, not even beginning to start its peaking, and it's right to the right is, and I don't know how well you can see it, but that is the burn area in Basalt from the fire from last fall, last July, the Lake Christine fire. So obviously we're dealing with the soil destabilization issues, certainly the burn scars where they were addressing that, but you can imagine how close that is to all the homes. And, fortunately, very few people lost their homes, but the Lake Christine fire really shows how vulnerable our communities, in fact, can be to fire hazards, and the importance of mitigation and other opportunities. And then looking at the Colorado River Basin more broadly, we are looking at our forecasts, and in terms of the Cameo, the Colorado River flows at Cameo, we're over 12,000 CFS this week, and then tapering off with the cooler weather, and it'll be picking up our snowpack. So it'll be very interesting to see what this runoff is like, and what our weather pattern will be, and if we have that intense temperatures, like what are you seeing in Denver, 80 degrees. And I mean, this could really make a difference when it comes to our snowpack. And certainly looking at how the desert is faring in Mesa County, and how green and gorgeous it is. It's really so wonderful to see that richness, I think, in the spring. And then in the left, you see the Claret Cup, which is the Colorado state succulent. Carried the bill with the Girl Scouts, but that is that's our state succulent, and already happily in bloom on the banks, and certainly in the rocky areas. But when you look at Loma, this is the trail system between Loma and Mac, and that's kind of a fun area. But again, the concept of the plot for Lake Powell inflows, and what it's going to mean coming up this year, and what our trends are. So we are looking at the trended down the first half of April, but most likely is going to the flows are and the fill at Lake Powell are going to rebound due to the accommodation of the April precipitation, which was strong, and an increase in observed runoff in the upper basin. So far below what we look at as our scenario planning and what we hope will in fact be an impact on the levels in Lake Powell. And then lastly, we have the Colorado River Basin Roundtable is at work and has developed a draft demand management education presentation that they're going through our communities and showing them. And as a result of the Colorado Water Plan and making sure that the citizens in our community understand the value of the water plan, then also the value of next steps as we are looking at this demand management process. And what has been helpful is the Colorado Roundtable has put together a demand management working group, and there are, in fact, it's a work in progress right now, and there's these regular calls working through the issues and being proactive in terms of the Colorado River's position on demand management issues and concepts, and I really admire the commitment that they have made thus far. And they're discussing the issues and questions and concerns and principles that we feel the Colorado River Basin needs to have a voice in. And there are 12 discussion points that they are feeling are factors that should be strongly considered while demand management is put in place. Supporting agriculture, equitable solutions. I can provide you with the summary, but also what it looks like to have a market mechanism when it comes to compensation, and also making sure that compensation really encompasses all the costs associated, and that all farmers and ranchers are in all basins will have the opportunity to participate, and recognizing maybe not one price is going to fit all. And then mechanisms in place such as market transitions, and then also can rural communities be protected from concentrated arrows of fallowing, which I think, and speculation. This is a concern, and we are probably all going to recognize it in our basins, what that is in fact going to mean. And then making sure that a demand management process is in fact that it should not just be used as a reservoir for future consumptive use development. And I think some of these factors are really under heavy discussion within this working group, and that we respect voluntary participation as being a factor, and that we have local municipalities supporting the projects, and also and strong representation. So there's a very, I think, a very important set of issues that they are working through and under consideration and under discussion. I said I think it's a very, very valuable process that the basin has underway, and also this outreach and these PowerPoints that are being done. And then I will only close with something really cute, which is my 4-month-old grandson. And so I will be seeing pretty soon. So with that, thank you very much for listening to the Colorado River Basin.
Thank you, Director Schwartz. Thanks for those great pictures. Are there any questions for Director Schwartz? Okay. Let's move on to the San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores River Basins. Director Hawkins.
Thank you. Well, Director Anderson, I am sorry that I wasn't able to attend the tour, but boy, I've been enjoying myself in Gunnison. And it's not every day that you get the state engineer to fix your bike on a bike ride after a board meeting, but that happened last night. But seriously, it's a lovely town, and just gorgeous here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time so far. I think the theme of my director reports has been about how awesome our snowpack has been, and we were really celebrating that after the 2018 season. I didn't put up the graph to look at today because it's starting to come down. We're past, at least we think, the big peak of the combined basin snowpack. But I did want to pull one statistic that I love, which is our current as percent of last year, we are at 5,000% in the combined basins. So, yeah, we still have a lot of snow sitting up high. The low snow has come off in a lot of areas, and so that's great. So what that means in our rivers that have reservoirs is that they're filling. And so I think a good example is the Dolores project was down to a 17,000 acre foot pool. It was really drawn down after the 2018 season. There were shortages for the irrigators. And it is not only set to fill, but we're expecting releases to start before the Memorial Day weekend. So that was not something we anticipated even as of the March forecast. So just a lot of precipitation still coming in, but there's a lot of storage to refill. And I think a lot of people are getting their ranching and farming operations back up after a hard year. Our roundtable met in April. I would say that the big focus was again on Colorado River issues. The committee on Colorado River issues had a workshop in advance of the meeting. The discussion is lively. There's a lot of interest in work groups. So I think you're going to hear some echoing of that, a lot of engagement at the roundtable on Colorado River issues. We have several watershed and stream management, drought resiliency plans that are continuing to move forward. The Upper San Juan and Mancos groups have been meeting, and then the stakeholder group for the San Miguel stream management plan is going to kick off on June 4th. The Southwestern Water Conservation District has the executive director position open. That closes next week on May 22nd. So just wanted to put that out there. It's a really important hiring position for our area. So I will keep my director's report short today and end with that.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. Are there any questions for Director Hawkins? Okay. Moving on to Director Anderson with the Gunnison.
Thank you. Welcome to the Gunnison. I am happy that the weather cooperated this time of year in Gunnison. It's a crapshoot to what you might find, and it actually maintained for us for the tour of Taylor Dam. I hope you've enjoyed your visit here. It's my home, not Gunnison particularly, but the Gunnison Basin. I left after I graduated from college or after I graduated from high school, went to college and spent the next 20 some years working in the construction business all over the Western US and Canada. But this area has always been home. And I said, no matter where I lived, that someday I was going home. So the opportunity presented itself, and I went home to the family farm, if you will. What a difference a year makes. A year ago, we were stressed of trying to figure out, at least on my project, and of course in the North Fork, how we were going to, just maintain what we had. And this year, there's an overabundance of water. We've seen some local flooding issues already, particularly with the creeks running off of the Uncompahgre Divide onto our project. Minimal damage. It's washed over some roads and places. It's as usual, it finds the weak infrastructure, and there's been several culverts that have failed and replaced in a panic there. Water is passionate, and even with an abundance of water, I see conflicts arise all over the valley. One of the things on my project is that we deliver water through a measuring device, and then we try to stay arm's length from that. But neighbors and shared headgates is a very big headache, and Nobody, probably including myself, sees eye to eye with their neighbors on a daily basis, so there is some conflict there. It's great for the North Fork. Last year they really struggled. A lot of fruit is produced up there, and you can't fallow an orchard without having to replace it. Planning's going well. I'm sure we will produce Olathe sweet corn this summer. The other thing that, the other crop that we're seeing almost with a gold rush mentality is hemp. My project has some 83,000 acres in it. I've heard estimates, low estimates of where we'll see something like 8,000 acres of hemp. The good news with this is hemp does not require near the water of forage crops or corns or the other crops in the valley. So we'll be able to put that water to work elsewhere this summer. Some big players have entered the game and purchased large land holdings. They like to irrigate the hemp with a drip system, but in this process, they have taken out the old furrow irrigation systems. So if it crashes, it's going to take a big effort to go back to what we had, and some concern there. On the Gunnison Basin Roundtable has not met since our last meeting. The meeting for the Gunnison Basin Roundtable is this coming Monday. Continuing with my talks in the past, you know, some of the structures and facilities of the Uncompahgre Valley water users, I spoke of Taylor Dam, the diversion structure on the Gunnison and the Black Canyon, and the Gunnison Tunnel itself. And I'd like to visit just a little bit about the South Canal. It's twice the size of any other canal on the project. It takes the water from the Gunnison Tunnel in a southwesterly direction. I notice this is difficult to see, but if you see the pinpoints, that's where the South Canal runs. There are 5 drops on this canal. There are 5 tunnels and a siphon. It was quite an engineering feat in its day. At one point in time, they had a surge reservoir in it, located in this area here. Voodoo Dobie, it didn't last. So that's the reason we have a siphon there now to take the water across a low spot there. The South Canal delivers water to the Uncompahgre River that we pick out of our other 6 river diversions. It also feeds the West Canal, which basically is the Highline Canal running along here. On this canal, we have constructed 4 hydro plants. This is the drop 3 facility. Maybe I should back up and a little bit and tell you about the business relationships. Drops 1 and 3 are a 50-50 venture between my association and Delta Montrose Electric Association. They have exceeded the feasibility studies to construct them. the drops 4 on the South Canal and drop 6 on Shavanal, which is off Shavanal Falls, which is off our M&D Canal, was developed by a consortium of Sorensen Engineering and their construction firm. They pay the water users a tariff on the water. And in the case of 4 and 6, next year, we have the right and we will buy 20% of those 2 facilities. Drop 5, which is the last drop on the South Canal, is wholly owned by my association. We leased it back to Sorensen Engineering and his partner such that they could take the investment tax credits out of the facility. And that lease will run for 12 years, and then we will operate it ourselves. And for the next 8 years, at that point in time, DMEA will become a 50-50 partner in the facility for one purchasing the power and we that power. I don't know if I have a better slide of this. Not really. This is drop 3, and they're basically all the same. The old drop come down here, and we lose about 30 foot in elevation at drop 3. The intake structure being up here, there's a gate on the canal that diverts the water into the intake structure. Also at this place, there's a set of 4 flop gates. And should that plant go down for any reason, those flop gates are tripped and the water goes down the drop structure. And this way, the irrigation water is not interrupted. This just is another picture showing drop 1 being here, that the west portal of the tunnel is in that area. Drop 3 here, drop 4. This is drop 5, and this is the terminus of the South Canal to the Uncompahgre River. There's a little drop in the South Canal that if you're man enough, you can kayak it. My wife says it's a good thing that the sport all come about before I was, after I was 30 years old or so, or I'd have sure been right in the middle of it. But it's world renowned. It's got a couple of nicknames. One of them is the Monster of Montrose, or shorter, just the M-Way. A local kid that became a pro kayaker discovered it, and he had the nerve to jump in the first time. There's a bridge right just upstream of that, and the kayakers jump off into that and then spin themselves around and surf that hydraulic jump. This kid here was from Australia. He'd come to Australia to try his hand with it. It's private property. It's kind of course, I would have to discourage it if I was confronted with it, but and they do police themselves, I would say, keep it clean. So why not let them enjoy that? There's a guy surfing that wave there. Just a picture of the slide showing the end of the South Canal there. And Andrew, I don't know if you're set up for that. This is a short video of a guy riding the M-Wave.
Your device is disconnected.
Oh, thanks.
They paddle themselves back up on in the eddy there, and
You should sell tickets.
It's a little different than your 4th of July.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little.
It's a little more intense than the Freedom Float. We need some skills for
Oh, look
this.
at that. Take skills.
You don't want to engineer a couch raft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I don't- That's not you?
no,
It's not you?
but it can be.
It could. You should have photoshopped your head in there. Wow.
those guys are in great physical shape. They can do that. Well, that
Yay for that guy.
that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that was great fun. Director Anderson, I was curious if the clarification in the Farm Bill with hemp this year cleared up some of the questions that folks in your area were having with using Bureau water to grow hemp.
Heather, that really solved the issue. In fact, the Bureau of Recs come out with a guideline that they have no problem using federal water to irrigate hemp. The act really took the low hemp off the controlled substance list, so solved the issue for us.
Are there any additional questions, Director Schwartz?
And thank you. Still, the hemp production still has oversight from the Colorado Department of Agriculture when you have to really register the location of each one of the fields and undergo the testing for the THC content. You seem that you have enough resources in the region to monitor the grow?
Yeah, the Colorado Department of Agriculture took over that. Not only the registration, the farmers need to be registered to plant it, but then they also do the testing to make sure it's not 0.03 THC level. So I have my doubts if all this is going to work. I hope it does. There's been a lot of money spent, and a lot of the old family farms are tied up in this now, and I certainly hope it works out.
Last question about West Montrose County. Are there going to be, has there been investment in processing facilities in the region as well? Or is that the processing going to be taken care of elsewhere?
There's been some limited investment there. There's been a huge investment in greenhouses they actually plant these from plugs. So there's huge investments in greenhouses. There's monstrous greenhouses throughout the valley now. That it's my understanding that most of the production will be harvested there, dried, and then baled and shipped elsewhere to squeeze the oil out of it.
Director Hawkins?
Director Anderson, I enjoyed the footage of the M wave. It's one of the scariest places I've ever been in my kayak. So, but my question was, how much power is being produced in the facilities on the South Canal? Like, what's the size of the plants?
I don't have the megawatt per hour, but we do have some scale. It's 13% of DMEA's annual demand. So we have some scale now. It's been a real boon for my association, I would add. We're able to take about $500,000 a year out of production, out of these productions, which when you're operating on a budget of some $4 million, it's very significant. The power production on the project had been long known and wanted, but it wasn't until several things happened: investment tax credits, low-cost financing. My association has a note with the Conservation Board for Drop 5. And this one I'm not too proud of, but General Electric moved their shops to China. So we have Chinese turbine generators in all the plants.
Great. Are there any questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Director Anderson. Okay, we are on to Director Trick in the North Platte.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just wanted to start by thanking Western Colorado University for hosting us on their campus. I haven't spent a lot of time on this campus before, but it's very beautiful, and I've enjoyed getting to know the campus and the town of Gunnison a little bit better. And thank you to Director Anderson and everybody at Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy for hosting us on the tour yesterday. I know we all enjoyed it, and we definitely enjoyed the food, and we were all really impressed with your custom barbecue that you guys take out. So that was really cool to see that you guys built that and got so much use out of it. And just a note on you mentioning the hemp production, I've always been curious of whether or not hemp would grow in the North Platte area, and I don't think anyone has tried to date. So I wish someone would investigate that, or at least rule it out as a possibility. So if any of the hemp people are listening, come to our basin and check it out maybe, and see if you think you could do it there. Because I've always wondered, we have a really, really short growing season, but I've heard that hemp is quite hardy, so you never know. And just also wanted to congratulate Joe Busto again for his Thunderbird Award for Weather Mod. We know that we've definitely appreciated all of his efforts with the North Platte cloud seeding project and getting the radiometer on top of the high school. And so just wanted to congratulate him again and point out just another great example of our staff getting accolades statewide. So I always like to start out with the statewide map. As you can see, we're 155% as of May 15th. It's interesting to compare. So this was the map that was shown on my slides from last meeting from March 20th. And all of the basins in the dark blue have increased, and all of the other basins, including the North Platte, has actually decreased. So it's kind of interesting to see the regional variability, but we are still in the North Platte at 108%. So we're having a great year, and like Steve mentioned, what a difference a year makes. And this was the graph from last meeting for the basin, and you can see the blue line there. We were still climbing in March. This is the graph as of May 14th, and we've peaked. I think our peak date was about April 16th. And you can see that on the dark blue line, but there was a little interesting uptick there around May 1st where we started climbing again before dropping. So it's always interesting to compare the graphs throughout the year. And so basically in the North Platte, I think Director Brown would agree with me when I say that we've had a cold and wet spring. And we have still a lot of snowpack on the mountains. As you can see, that's a picture of the Zirgle Range between Steamboat and North Park. And we have a lot of people turning on water still, but the Walden Reservoir currently is already full. So that seemed to be kind of early, especially as compared to last year. And in other news around the basin, there was a group of folks that drove over from Walden to Craig to attend the dam safety rulemaking stakeholder meeting. And I'm not sure if anybody who didn't know about that, needs to find information about it. But I just wanted to mention that there is a dam safety rulemaking occurring. They've had a number of stakeholder meetings around the state. I think the one in the Craig area that we attended was the very last stakeholder meeting that they held around the state. But if you're looking for information on that, or you have not yet been aware of it, you can go to the DNR website at water.state.co.us, and you can see on the front page there's materials from the public rulemaking. And then if you click on where the orange circle is there, you can see all of the rule drafts and see what's changing there. They've actually extended the public comment period on this till June 1st. So if you need to make comments, you can still get them in. I believe the rules are going to affect some of the spillway design requirements and some of the other requirements that they will put onto dam owners and operators as far as meeting with their engineers prior to doing other types of inspections, stuff like that. So if you're interested, go ahead and check that out and see what the rules are changing there. And in roundtable news, they have not had a meeting recently since our last meeting, but their next meeting is actually going to be next week on the 21st in Walden at the U.S. Forest Service building at 6 p.m. And I believe they're going to be considering 2 WSRF applications. One is for the Ross Reservoir rehabilitation, and the other is an application from Owl Mountain Partnership for several water control feature installations and rehabilitations. So if you're in the North Platte area, come and you can come by to the meeting. We'd sure like to have you there. And just trying to keep it short here. Finally, just want to show some photos. So I come from cattle country, but I would be curious to see if anyone can identify the one thing that does not look like the others in this picture. And there it is. And so we are cattle country, but now we're known as moose country. So this was actually near my house, and this was taken around May 10th. So just wanted to share a couple pictures of it was a young moose, and we had just turned on water that day. So around a few hours after that, he was kind of flooded out of that meadow. And I'm not sure if anybody is aware, but they actually are so tall, they have to get down on their front legs to graze. So it's kind of funny when you can see a picture of them doing that because they're kneeling down, and it's kind of entertaining. So just wanted to share some moose country pictures as well. And I will close with that.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Director Trick? Thank you for that update and for those great pictures. We just have deer in my backyard. All right, we are on to the South Platte with Director Yon.
All right. Well, it's good to be here in Gunnison. I want to thank Director Anderson for the barbecue and the trip into the bowels of the Taylor River Reservoir Dam. And thank you. What am I supposed? I don't. Okay. It's always good to be here, and I want to thank the Uncompahgre. Is that how you say it? Uncompahgre Valley Water users for putting on the barbecue in the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District as well. And it was a good time. I always like going on our tours and seeing the things of the area. So I'm glad that we got to see Taylor Reservoir again. And it was interesting to see the avalanche that went across the river and plugged it off for a little bit. I was concerned for the dam caretaker's house there because it looked like it's not that high above the river that it might get flooded, but he didn't have any of that. So, and there's also some debris on the ice out on the reservoir. So it's a lot of snow, it looks like. So we don't have quite as much snow in the South Platte Basin, but it's still, as you can see from Director Trick's presentation, the South Platte is still doing good at 122%. I also want to thank Director Gibbs for leading us in our bike ride last night. That was fun. And, we talk about fish ladders and bypass structures. Well, we had a couple of them last night. We had a bypass gate. There's a regular gate, and then there's a bike bypass, and then there's bike ladders that go so you don't have to open or it goes where the fence would be so the cattle can't get through. So I only had a couple of mishaps. Caught my pedal on a piece of sagebrush and just about lost it right in front of Kevin there. And then I held up Director Dutton.
Uh-oh.
There it goes. DD. Okay. So it's always fun though to have people show us around and that know the area. So thank you, Director Gibbs. South Platte Basin, I don't have a whole lot of news. We're just in the swing of things. It's springtime, so I don't have near as many calls from farmers because they're out busy. They're planting corn. They're just about completely done planting corn. It was pretty wet in our area, so it took them a little while. They had a window there where they were able to get some planting done. So the planting of corn and sugar beets is complete, and now irrigation has started. So we started the first week of May, which is a little bit later than normal. Usually it's around the 26th of April or so, but it's been a little wetter. So we didn't have to start until the first week of May. And I do have a video from that, but I'll hold that till the end. Right now, though, we were running direct flow into the North Sterling Reservoir. So we have a direct flow right. It's a 1914 right. We were running it into the reservoir and running out, serving our farmers. That way we don't have to draw on storage. And so that right got called out yesterday. So while before our meeting yesterday, I was called out. And so we had to shut off our direct flow right. And it's going even more senior today. The call is an 1888 right on the South Platte. So we're waiting for the snow melt to begin coming down. And down in our area, you actually have to have a little bit of rainfall with the snow melt to get it to push all the way to the end of the river down where we are. So we're looking forward to that, and hopefully we can recover some of our storage that we've already used and continue irrigating throughout the summer. The other thing that's happening, you know, my wife and I have a ranch, and we have cattle. So it's calving season. So that's I had a couple pictures, but I wasn't able to get them from my iPad over to there. So anyway, but it's calving season, and so we have a new crop of baby calves, and that's always fun, and especially when the grass is green and the sky is blue. It's just a happy time out on the ranch. And also, I filled in for a ditch rider. I can't remember what he had to do, but I filled in for a ditch rider, and you can see along the ditch system, you can see new life with the wildlife as well, little goslings and ducklings and deer, and so it's just a nice time. Springtime is one of the best times out in our area, of course. So we enjoy that time out there. And also springtime is when my son finally graduates from college. So my youngest, so he graduates Saturday from the University of Wyoming. And so we get to go up there and celebrate with him as well. But he is coming back to Colorado, and he's in water resources, and he'll be a consulting engineer. So out of for RJH Consultants in Inglewood. So he'll be living near Parker. Just one more person in the Front Range. So sorry about that. On a bigger water picture, we have the South Platte Regional Water Development Concept that has kicked off. And I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but several years back, we started discussions, some of us on the lower basin, and with some municipalities on the Front Range, and we called it SPROG, the South Platte Water Group. I can't even, we have all kinds of interesting names, but we started that, just discussions, kind of taking our hats off and thinking on a big picture of what we can do on the South Platte to be more efficient, using some ATM, some free river conditions. And so out of that group, we went to the round table and we asked for a grant to do some work on that from the CWCB, and we are doing that now. And we had a kickoff meeting at Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District back in April. And now we're having a round. We have different work groups: agriculture work group, environmental work group, governance work group. We have several work groups that are working, but there's about 50 people that have signed up to participate in it. So it's a big undertaking. Brown and Caldwell and Leonard Rice Engineering is helping us with that. So this is just ramping up, and it's a big undertaking and a lot of moving parts, but I think in the end, it'll be a good thing. So that's one of the exciting things going on in the South Platte Basin. We also have the Water Education Colorado tour on the lower South Platte this year, and it's June 17th and 18th. So if you want to go, you're too late. It's already full. So, but I thought I'd tell you that we have a big interest in that. So it's going to be a good tour. We have the Interim Water Resources Committee is going to be on that tour as well. So we're going to see all kinds of, we're going to stop at one. We have one group of guys, one family that's starting up pretty big in the hemp as well. And it's an expensive undertaking. And so this isn't something that you just do lightly. You go, oh, I think I won't grow corn this year, I'll grow hemp. It's not that easy. It's a lot of work, and it's a very expensive undertaking, and you have to have a market. So, you know, and if all of us went and turned to hemp, of course, the market would fall just like it does with other commodities. So, you know, the idea that all of the South Platte should go to hemp was not a good idea. So hopefully some of the farmers can make it go in your area, in our area as well, and we can see what it leads to. So we're going to stop at that, at dairy, the Pawnee Power Plant, some new storage structure, and we're going to have dinner at North Sterling Reservoir that night. So it's going to be a good time, I think. And as you know, when we first bring, or maybe you don't know, when we first bring water into our canal, so our inlet canal is 61 miles long. So it takes about two days to get water from the river to our reservoir. And then our outlet canal is 65 miles long, and it takes about 2.5 days to get from when I release the water. And so we released the water on a Wednesday morning, and we got there at Friday about to the end of the ditch about 3 o'clock on Friday. But in the meantime, our guys are out with the water because we are the furthest north ditch in our area. And all of the tumbleweeds from near and far like to congregate in our ditch all winter long. And then we have to turn water in and deal with those tumbleweeds. So I shot a short video of some of our guys, but this is towards the end of our ditch. We also have a larger drag line that we swing out there and rake the weeds back. I didn't get a video of that on our larger section. As you can imagine, our ditch is about 50 feet wide at the beginning, and because farmers use the water along the way, it's only about 8 feet wide at the end. So I'm in a section of ditch here, it's about 12 feet wide, and our guys are raking some weeds out, so I thought I'd show you a short video of that.
Andrew,
Can you do that?
will you key up the video?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you can see, it doesn't look like water, but there's water there. Yeah. So our guys spend, not the first night, but the next 2.5 or day and a half following the water and raking weeds out. And so I did have a picture of a pile afterwards in one section, and it was about 3 times as high as the pickup. And the question was, what do we do with the weeds afterwards? After they dry, we burn them. Sometimes if we have the opportunity, we'll burn them in the bottom of the ditch, but you can see the weeds flowing on top of the water. That great South Platte water.
So sweet.
Yeah. So that's just one of the things that people don't often think of, but they have to stay with it through the night, or you can get jams of the weeds, and it can cause a lot of problems of overtopping the banks, and that's not good. So that ends my report. I did have a picture from the porch, but I wasn't able to get it over there, so I'll do that next time. All right. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Director Yan. Are there any questions? Great. Okay, we are moving on to the Arkansas Basin. Director Goebel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'd also like to thank Director Anderson and his Water User Association and the Upper Gunnison District for the great tour and reception Tuesday. That was a lot of fun. So the Arkansas River Basin Water Forum was held 3 weeks ago in Pueblo. This was the 25th anniversary, and we had a lot of CWCB staff come speak, and that was great. State Engineer Ryan came down and spoke. The keynote speakers were our own Russ George and Senator Cory Gardner, and recovering state employee and newly hired hand on the family farm, John Stolp. So that was fun. I got to talk to him a little bit, and his son's putting him to work, so that's good. About 200 people attended, so we had a good turnout, and that's always fun. So to get into my slides here, I'm sure most of you remember the Spring Creek fire last summer. It was started on June 21st, actually in Castilla County. over in the Rio Grande Basin, but traveled east into Huerfano County. And as you can see on this map, the towns of La Veta and Walsenburg are both located downstream of the burn scar along the Caceres River, which runs kind of at the south, the lower part of the map, the southern part of the map through La Veta and then on to Walsenburg. And are looking at the high probability of disastrous flooding this year. In addition to being the third largest wildfire in Colorado's history at 108,000 acres, the burn severity was one of the most intense ever recorded. It was around 46% of the ground was either high or moderate burns. And from my understanding, you're usually in the 20 to 25% range. So very severe. So that leaves hydrophobic soils throughout most of the watershed. This is a map showing the soil burn severity. So you can see yellow and red are moderate and high respectively. So pretty severe burn. And unfortunately, the river and tributaries below the burn scar through these communities have been inundated with invasive vegetation and have had very little maintenance throughout the years. So these conditions contribute to increased flooding. In 1986, the Caceres River was able to handle flows within its banks around 3,000 CFS, but just 2 years ago in 2017, only 700 CFS would cause flooding in La Veta. So, and this was even before the fire. So in their damage survey report, the NRCS identified some 18,000 linear feet of channel clearing needed, and they estimated that to cost $4.3 million. And being a pretty poor community, they just couldn't afford it. So the county and the surrounding communities turned to volunteers for help. So the AmeriCorps arrived in early January and worked for about 12 weeks, clearing about 10,000 linear feet of the river. Team Rubicon started in early April with 65 mostly military veterans that cleared 3,000 linear feet of the river in 3 days, which is pretty amazing. And it was in a pretty highly technical area, I understand. And then next came the SWIFT crew, which is a group of prisoners that have expertise in firefighting and flood mitigation. And then throughout the whole effort, local volunteers put in many, many hours. So in all, volunteers contributed around 12,000 hours and completed what was estimated to cost between $4 and $5 million worth of work for under 50,000. So pretty amazing what you can do with volunteers. And this just is a shot along the river after clearing. So as you can imagine, runoff off of burn scars not only comes in higher quantities, but with a lot more debris. So if there's less chance of it plugging up, better off you are. And so I wanted to show a couple maps here. So this map shows the town of Walsenburg, and this shows the extent of a flood, a 50% chance flood, which is referred to commonly as a 2-year flood. So the red outline there is before they did the channel clearing. So you can see it's up into the town, and this is a pretty common rainfall event, obviously. And then the blue is after the channel clearing, so it made quite a difference. And a similar map for La Veta with a 5-year event. And then just a couple more flood maps. So this is Walsenburg with a 25-year event and a 100-year event. So you can see a lot of the town would be flooded in these type of events. And then similar maps for La Veta, which is even worse. The 10-year event on the left and the 100-year event on the right. So you can see even just with a 10-year event, which is about 2.5 inches of rainfall, you're looking at a lot of, I'm not sure the percentage, but a lot of the town is going to see pretty severe flooding. So like I mentioned, not only will runoff amounts be much larger than before the wildfire, but they will come off much faster. So with the help, a lot of help from DWR staff. So thank you, Director Ryan, for for all your staff's help. Early warning gauges have been installed that will trigger sirens in Levita and Walsenburg to warn residents of oncoming floods. I understand that it's only about a 30 to 40 minute heads up, but it's better than nothing. And so these are actually radar cameras installed. And I asked, how'd you pick that tree? And they said, well, there was already some flooding that occurred and it didn't go downstream. So we thought, well, what the heck, let's try it. And so we put it as high as we could get it. And so these cameras, you can see there's two of them. One measures the stage of the river and the other measures velocity. Because apparently during runoff events, stream velocities start increasing prior to the gauge levels increasing. So it gives you just, maybe a few more minutes of time for warnings. And then there's also risk to 100 or more irrigation head gates downstream of the burn scar, immediately downstream of the burn scar, which could cut off irrigation to around 20,000 acres of irrigated farm ground in the area. So right now there's a project ongoing that originated with CWCB staff to identify all these head gates and provide information in a public meeting to the ditch owners as to what lawful head gate restoration steps they can take to temporarily resume irrigation post-flood. So we know it's going to flood. We don't know how high, but some proactive measures being taken to prepare for it. So, and I'd just like to thank Sandy White and the Huerfano County Water Conservancy District for providing a lot of these photos and information for this presentation and for their leadership locally. I mean, it's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of entities working together to prepare, to clean up and to prepare for flooding, but they've taken a leadership role. And then a special thanks to CWCB for providing not only expertise, but funding to help with these recovery efforts. So all of us can work together and hopefully reduce our risk. And I guess I just added this slide here at the last minute just to show the difference the year makes. So Huerfano County was in pretty tough condition. You can, let's see, right in that's Huerfano County there. So you can see that's right when the fire was going. I think that was the first week of July. And so we go from super drought with a fire, like third largest in the state history, to flooding conditions and almost no drought. So it's just amazing, less than a year even, how much can change. So with all that dire news, I thought I'd add some photos. So this is a photo in one of our pastures, just wildflowers coming up. It's always like Director Jan said, it's always a fun time of year to get out and see all these things. And to stick with the cattle theme, this is one of our new babies. One of my boys' favorites. They already named it Panda. So it's a fun time to be out on the flatlands. So, and that'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Director Goebel. And in July, I expect to see the latest round of pictures of your boys with their steers with no shirts on and their muck boots. So
That'll be coming.
Just
yes,
letting you know, I'm
definitely.
anticipating the yearly picture. Are there any questions for Director Goebel? Great. Thank you for that report. Okay, we will head over to the City and County of Denver with Director Brody.
Thank you. And I too want to thank our host. This is my first time in Gunnison, and I look forward to returning with my family. But it's been a great opportunity to get to see this part of the state, get to experience this wonderful university. I also want to thank the CWDC staff for all of their hard work in putting this meeting together. Sometimes the logistics and behind the scenes go unnoticed, but it's impressive what you guys pull off meeting after meeting, so thank you. So wanted to update you on our water supply. You can see here our reservoirs are looking really, really good. Almost all of them are above average for what we're projecting for our supplies. It should be a great year up at Dillon, both for water supply and for recreation. We're obviously preparing for potential flooding, so there's room in the reservoir to accommodate flooding if it occurs, but it should be a really fun year for boating and other recreational activities up there. We are not anticipating any drought restrictions this year, which is great. We've also had a pretty wet spring. Denver metro area is above average for rainfall for the year so far. So we'll see if that trend continues, but like the rest of the state, we're looking really, really good in the metro area. Wanted to update on a couple of the priority projects for our region. First, I know Gross Reservoir expansion came up yesterday, and I wanted to just clarify a couple things. First of all, the project is moving forward. Design is progressing. We're past 60% and working toward, Denver Water is working toward final design. We are also in the procurement process for our CMGC contractor. We want to get them on board early so that they can influence the final design stages. So we anticipate going to contract probably in June with that contractor. In terms of litigation, so as I think many of you know, there is federal litigation concerning the NEPA process for the Gross Reservoir project, which is something that is not unexpected anytime you do a major project such as this. So that federal litigation is proceeding. The federal agencies and Denver Water's intervener answered the complaint, and we anticipate the record being filed sometime in June with briefing to follow in the fall. In terms of Boulder County, so there are a couple things that have been going on with Boulder County. We did under the law known as the 1041 law, which is the law that allows and encourages local governments to oversee any project of statewide concern or projects in areas of state interest. And we did, Denver Water did believe that it qualified for an exemption to that law because at the time that the 1041 law was passed, the local zoning code did allow dams in the area in which the project is being expanded. Denver Water went in front of the Board of County Commissioners with that argument. That argument was denied. And so under Rule 106, Denver Water had 28 days to appeal that. We did that to preserve that argument. But at the same time, Denver Water did also go ahead and initiate the 1041 application process. And we anticipate submitting that application in early July. We have been told by Boulder County that they will not accept the application while the litigation is pending. So that continues to be a challenge that we're going to work through. But we are proceeding in good faith to prepare a full 1041 application, and we're hoping that Boulder County will accept it and consider it under the criteria established in their local zoning code. So that's the update on Gross Reservoir. Also wanted to update you on something that I think my predecessor, Patty Wells, probably informed the board about, which is optimal corrosion control. So back in 2012, Denver Water had an exceedance of the action level under the lead and copper rule, which triggered the need to do some further analysis investigation and determine what type of treatment would best minimize the lead levels in Denver and throughout the Denver Water Service area. So just to be clear, there's no lead in Denver Water's water. There's also no lead lines in our supply system, but there are still lead service lines and in some cases, interior plumbing fixtures that may have lead in them. And as a result, Denver Water for many years has been monitoring for lead exposure throughout our system. As a result of that 2012 exceedance and the analysis that was done under CDPHE's oversight, CDPHE determined that the optimal corrosion control treatment technology was the addition of orthophosphate into our entire supply system. Denver Water had actually recommended a different treatment technology, which would be a pH alkalinity adjustment, which is effective, but not as effective in bringing down lead levels as the orthophosphate. But the reason that Denver Water took that position was there are a lot of potential adverse impacts associated with phosphate, which could impact our entire regional system. All the orthophosphate that Denver Water would put in would need to be taken out by wastewater treatment providers at great expense. And also there was concern about additional nutrients entering into our rivers and urban lakes and streams through irrigation, incorporating with stormwater runoff. We have waterways in the Denver metro area that are already very nutrient stressed. And so this was a concern both from the wastewater treatment providers as well as from the environmental community and from Denver Water as well. As well as I should also add the Denver Local Health Department was concerned about the potential adverse impacts of orthophosphate. So for the last year, Denver Water, CDPHE, EPA, and many, many stakeholders from throughout our region have been exploring an alternative approach, which would, instead of just treating the system with a chemical inhibitor, would incorporate the removal of those lead service lines on an accelerated basis, filters, and also some type of chemical treatment, ideally a pH adjustment to avoid the impacts of orthophosphate. And I'm pleased to say we think we're very, very close to an alternative solution that will be superior for public health, will eliminate the impacts of orthophosphate, and frankly will save the region money as well. So I hope to have more to share on that at our next meeting, but I'm pleased to report that we've made a lot of progress, and also want to thank the many state and federal and local stakeholders who have participated in that process. It's been a challenging at times, but also very, very, I think, good process, looking at, again, what is the best solution for public health as well as for the environment. And then finally, in other news, just wanted to update, I attended the Metro Roundtable annual meeting last week. It was a good discussion. We heard a little bit about SPROG. I understand there's potentially new acronyms that they're throwing around. We also heard about a grant request that we'll be discussing a little later on from Tri-County to encourage folks who are on well water to look at conservation efforts, which was an interesting public education and outreach campaign that they're considering. And then I believe one of the directors, it may have been Director George, mentioned the AWWA ACE conference, which will be hosted in Denver next month. I'll be moderating a panel during Legal Day on June 11th. My particular panel will be looking at enforcement priorities for EPA, for AWWA members, and some strategies when you're in an enforcement situation. I think there will also be a presentation at Legal Day on Colorado River and a presentation on PFAS and PFAS, which unfortunately is emerging as a constituent that many, many water providers are concerned about here in Colorado and throughout the country. So that should be an interesting conversation. And I think that's all I have, so thank you.
Great. Thank you for that update, and thanks especially for touching on the issues with the lead issue. It does sound like you guys are getting to a really good place and having a thoughtful conversation, and that's a fascinating topic that's usually included in your report and was included in Director Wells' report, so thank you for sharing about that.
Sure.
Are there any questions for Director Brody? All right. We're going to move on then to the Rio Grande. So I also want to thank the hosts. Tuesday was a really nice day. I was very appreciative to Director Anderson and your folks, and then to Frank Kugel and Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District. It was so nice to just be up in the mountains and to see Taylor Dam. And Director Jan and I signed our names in the dust on the pipes in the bowels of the dam. So I'm excited to come back in 30 years and add a little notation to that. It was really beautiful. So thank you for your hospitality and for putting on that great event. It was much appreciated. A quick update about our Basin Roundtable. We had a meeting Tuesday that I missed because I was having so much fun in the bowels. But I've heard back from our roundtable chair, Nathan Combs, that the meeting covered a lot of ground and spent a lot of time talking about the Education Committee's efforts and specifically the new website and logo that I shared the beta version last time. And so once we have all that finalized, I'll be sure to make sure you guys all have the link and can go check out all the beautiful graphics and I think the best part will be the interactive map that shows where all the roundtable funds have gone and the projects that have been completed with that. So it'll be a great tool. There were also discussions about potential projects to seek Water Smart funding with the Bureau of Reclamation, and so that's a great thing that we're trying to work on. The Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project, I think so far is the only entity in the valley to have received a Water Smart grant. And so while that's a pretty exciting thing to happen, it'd be great to get more of those funds come into our area. There also, as I understand, was a great deal of discussion about the Regional Forest Service, the Region 2 U.S. Forest Service's decision to allow an exemption for there to be chainsaws in the Weminuche Wilderness. And that is just for trail clearing. And so it's a complicated issue that, we can talk about more on the side, but I think it's important for this group to be aware of that decision was made to allow outfitters to have ease and to deal with access issues. There are places in the Weminuche where there have been as many as 40 trees down per mile or upwards of that. And so that gets to be quite a problem when your only tool is a handsaw. I would say that I was disappointed because our district in Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we have infrastructure in the wilderness, and the infrastructure issues were not considered and included. Maybe they were considered, but they weren't included in the final decision. And so we will still be doing our maintenance with handsaws this year and dealing with all the down trees that are across our ditch with primitive methods. But it's all right. We hire a lot of strong guys to do that. So we'll get it done like we always do. I wanted to specifically thank the staff. I hope you know how much we appreciate you and we appreciate all your efforts. And if we don't tell you that enough, we really should, because you guys are all exceptional. We were kind of joking yesterday, but not really, about how award-winning you are. But I think even everybody in this group probably deserves an award just for your character and your commitment to the agency. So sincerely, thank you all for your hard work. I want to specifically thank Kevin Hauk and Chris Sturm. They've continued to be really helpful and really responsive for the communities that are recovering from the spring fire. Director Goebel had a lot of great pictures and maps from that. And Kevin and Chris have also remained committed to the Castilla County side as well. And it's been a great reflection of the agency, and it's also been really appreciated. So thank you for that. I have to show this graph because it's very exciting. We are still well above average, and we keep seeing little storms that keep making those nice little hedgehog bumps. And so we're excited to have the opportunity to get some water down our rivers and hopefully recharge the aquifers. I saw today that it's supposed to be 70 degrees in South Fork, but then we could get as much as 11 inches of snow up there in the next few days. So quite a spring. With all that snow, this is the SNOTEL table, and I wanted to highlight 3 points, and I probably should have made some notes for myself because I can't really see that far, but the gist of it is there's, I think, 37. Is that right, Director Jan? 32.5. Wow, I have terrible eyes. There's 32.5 inches of water at Beartown right now, which is up near Stony Pass. There's almost 30 inches at Cumbres Trestle, which is on Cumbres Pass. And that's the major source of water for the San Antone and Los Pinos rivers. And then Wolf Creek Summit has over 40 inches of snow right now. Of water. There's still over 100 inches of snow.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing and pretty impressive how much water is sitting up in our mountains right now. So with that comes an interesting conversation. I know that you all woke up this morning and thought, I'd love to learn about the Rio Grande Compact. So right now I'm going to switch and start reading the joint investigation. It's only 300 pages, so settle in. But the Rio Grande Compact was signed in 1938. And I think what's different from our compact to some of the others is that we have an annual obligation. There's not a rolling average. So this graphic gives a visual representation of if the blue line is the flow that you receive in a year, then the lime green shaded area is the amount we have to deliver to the New Mexico state line. The amount below the green line is the amount that's available for consumption in Colorado. And so you can see how that cornucopia is up there and just how from year to year, the amount of water that has to get to the state line changes. And the Division of Water Resources tries really hard to hit that number pretty precisely every year. So with this, even though there's cause for celebration that we have a lot of water this year, there's also a lot of work that has to go in a year like this because we are projecting a total of 850,000 acre feet for the Rio Grande at Del Norte, and average is about 625,000. So well above average, very exciting. But with that, our obligation to New Mexico is 292,000 acre feet. So the water users throughout the irrigation season will be curtailed on average 28.4%. So a little over 28% of our water users will, even if they're in priority, will not see water at their head gate because the water has to get downstream to New Mexico. So it's a reality that we live with and everybody is pretty used to at this point, but it's just interesting how sometimes these big years don't always mean big supplies of water for everyone. The Conejos has a much steeper curve, and that's due to the condition of their hydrology and the historic practices that were in place on the Conejos at the time of the joint investigation, which was the study that informed the compact. And I would love to get into this another time because we can nerd out on the compact all day, but the gist of it is, since the Conejos has a much steeper obligation curve, their anticipated delivery is anticipated yield this year is 400,000. The combined index of that 188, we've established, I have terrible eyes, 188,000 has to make it to the confluence with the Rio Grande and then be delivered to New Mexico. And so those water users will see curtailment more along the lines of 41%. So it's a pretty sobering thing. And it's just, again, it's the reality that we live with, but these are the years that folks in Kevin's office and Craig Cotton, our division engineer, get a lot of calls because there's high water, there's water in the river, why can't I turn on my head gate? And it's because we have to make our obligation to New Mexico and keep them whole as we promised we would in 1938. So it's pretty fascinating. This was the Conejos River last week. I was riding around with Amy Beatty and Kate Greenberg and Cleve Simpson and Nathan Combs, and Nathan made the comment that he had never seen the river at this location this high. So it's pretty impressive for a guy that's lived in the valley his whole life and cares a lot about water to make that statement. We're seeing some really high flows and things have really peaked bumped up in the last couple of days. I think we're probably a few weeks from peak, but it was interesting to see the river jumped up 900 acre feet overnight. So we're starting to see a little bit of warmth hitting all that water in the snow. We're going to see some flows. This was a picture from our tour. I really want to thank you, Amy, for coming down, and Commissioner Greenberg, if you're listening, thank you for taking the time. We appreciate the opportunity to show you guys around and describe the things that we do and why we do them and talk a little about administration. And with this crew, you might guess there were a couple laughs along the way, but we tried to keep it pretty serious. So thank you so much for coming. It was a great opportunity, Amy was there for 1 day, Kate was there for 2, and so we took her around and showed her a few different sub-districts, and then she was able to, we had planned this months ago, saying May 9th would be great. We can see potato planting. There's going to be so much going on. And we ended up touring a packing shed and the entire Colorado Potato Administrative Committee board came out because none of them could plant that day because it was snowing and they would have been stuck in their fields. So maybe that was a good thing. She got to see all those guys, but you'll have to come back when it's not quite so muddy. On a personal note, I wanted to just show a few pictures. I had the joy in April of rafting down the Grand Canyon. It was awesome. I don't quite have, I'm kind of getting teary because it meant, didn't expect this. It meant a lot. So I picked out my favorite pictures and I will show them to you. So we got to see incredible Native American ruins and scenery, beautiful hikes, just gorgeous. I was kind of blown away that we were in the desert, but there was water everywhere, but maybe I should be used to it since that's what home's like these days. And then we were really fortunate that everything was blooming. And there were rapids, as you can imagine. That's probably, I had my mouth wide open and took some of the river home with me. So sorry, Colorado River friends. And I think that was my favorite picture of our group of friends. And so that is my report. I have a hilarious video. If you want to hear what I sound like laughing as hard as I can, we'll play that if there's time. But we'll move on to, unless there are any questions, we'll move on to the Yampa. Oh, are we going to do it? Okay, let's do it. Okay, go for it, Andrew. Turn it up loud. So this was Lava Falls. It's the granddaddy of them all, rapid. We were on a giant boat. So I think if you were in a little boat, it would probably be a little scarier. On this boat, it was mainly an amusement park ride. And you might be able to hear my dad screaming at the top of his lungs the entire time. So the gal right here in the black is Martha, who's one of my best friends, and she was terrified of rapids before we went on this trip. So as you can see, she settled in and figured it out. So thank you for indulging me, but it was really special. And I think one of the things I really enjoyed was, we've been having so many conversations over the last year about the Colorado River and demand management and drought contingency, but to see this area that is the conduit between the upper and lower basins, and to really think about the consequences of how we manage the river, and then all the different people who utilize and love that place. It was really neat, and it was cool to have that extra layer to think about while we were going down the river. So yeah, thanks for letting me share. It looks like we are at our last report. Director Brown.
Thank you. That's a tough act to follow. So greetings. I don't have a slideshow for you today. During this time of year in the Yampa and White Basins, it's so beautiful that if I advertise it, we won't have any room for ourselves. So just a quick thank you to Brent Newman. I just want to say that I don't know if you all know what Flat Stanley is, but I think that we could have like a Brent Flat Stanley. He gets around the basin so often that you're just doing an excellent job. And I know that everyone in my basin has really appreciated your leadership on the DCP. And I know it's not easy. And so just thank you again, and to the rest of the staff. So you're ever the professional, and we appreciate it. So the Yampa White, we are at 109% of snow water equivalent. We've really just had an average year. It hasn't been outrageous, but after following the last 5 of a little bit below average, it's been a real treat for us. And as of today, 102% of average precipitation. As Director Trick mentioned, we've had a nice cold spring. So while we're expecting a lot of soil saturation, we've had the luxury of a little bit slower of a runoff, which I think is going to make a big difference for us this year. Moving on to the Basin Roundtable. So I just wanted to let you all know that we funded, the Basin Roundtable and CWCB funded a project called the Leafy Spurge Project. And the effort was brought to us by many local river enthusiasts and the county weed managers to start mapping this really invasive weed that we are seeing in the Yampa Valley. And the effort really blossomed. I think there were some naysayers to begin with that this was just too big of a piece of a pie to bite off. But what we've seen is great collaboration with the University of Wyoming and landowners coming together to map this. And we also have a new chemical product that is being tested on this, which would be an excellent treatment for leafy spurge if it works. And so this is a really phenomenal project that has come from funding from CWCB. So I wanted to make you aware, and I will keep you posted as this multi-year project continues. Additionally, 2 of our newest Basin Roundtable members, Deirdre McNabb and Sean Welder from the White River Basin, have started a group called the White River Alliance, and they had their first river cleanup this spring. Really great to see what new members from across the basin are working on, and that's really exciting for us to have new members coming to the table. And I think with DCP discussions, we've also just really seen an increase in interest from our basin, and Roundtable has grown from the usual 30 to almost 60 plus people at these meetings every other month. So really impressive participation. In that vein, we have a new IBCC member, Jeff Meyer. He is a really excellent individual. I've just been incredibly impressed with his ability to facilitate and learn about complicated river issues, having never been part of them. And so you'll all get a chance to meet him hopefully in July, but that's really exciting that we're diverging from the STP, as I learned this new terminology yesterday, and now we're still STP if you say 13, so a couple more people. In the same thinking as many of the other Western Slope communities, we've started a Big River Committee as well to just look at a little bit more in-depth demand management practices and what that means for our basin and how we would be able to address these problems going forward if demand management is to be a viable option. And then just a shout out to your staff, Director Ryan. You know, Erin gave her phone number and people are using it, as you mentioned yesterday. But folks, maybe it's because we're not in a drought, but really dealing with this new measuring device, new to us, measuring device issue that we're in, and really appreciative of her and her staff and their willingness to be flexible. It's very important and is definitely not going unnoticed. So you're going to see a few applications, and I'm not going to pull them aside and talk about them as we get into these grant applications, but I think one big thing that's happened since the Basin Roundtable in the Yampa White Valley was formed is that I always tell everybody our best product is networking and relationships. But really, we're finally starting to see some implementation and on-the-ground projects. And these are two very, they're just excellent collaborative projects that you'll see today before you, both the Maybell ditch I don't know, it's just a whole new thing. So whatever you want to call that, infrastructure. I just thought about fish mammal and don't make up any new words, Jackie. And and the other one is down in the Morgan's Bottom ditch in Hayden. So thank you for considering those. And the last thing that I have is that our local national monument, Dinosaur National Monument, has just received a dark star designation, dark sky designation. So if you haven't already visited, take some time out of your busy lives and see the stars. It's a really cool place. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Brown. Any questions? Yes, Director Schwartz.
A quick follow-up, because when I was cleaning up, this was May 14th, 2012. An entire red state. So think of where we are today and what happens. But I think this was a very telling time when we were looking at your basin at 14%, the Colorado at 10%. So, be grateful for what we have, right? Thank you for letting me share that. I didn't have any slideshow.
Great. All right. Unless there's anything else, let's take a 15-minute break, and we're going to be back for some consent agenda items and then grant applications. Am I on? Yeah, we're gonna get going again with our agenda. Linda Bassi with the consent agenda items A, B, and C that were removed.
Thank you. Consent agenda item 1A is case number 19 CW 3016. Application of Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Authority and a few other entities. And we just found out recently that this case has been dismissed, so it's been deemed moot for purposes of this agenda item. So I am going to move along to consent agenda item 1B, if that's fine with the board. Consent agenda item 1B is case 19 CW 3019, application of Fort Collins and Loveland Water District. It's an application to quantify municipal return flows for use in a plan for augmentation and also to meet return flow obligations. Staff filed a statement of opposition in this case with the intention of getting protective terms and conditions, negotiating protective terms and conditions with the applicant to address unknown future uses that would be allowed by sale, contract, exchange, or otherwise to extinction for these quantified municipal return flows. And we recommend that the board ratify this statement of opposition.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Are there any questions for Linda about consent agenda item 1B? Yes, Director Trick.
Thank you, Linda. So this is from what I understand, a case where the applicant is going to quantify water coming out of their municipal water treatment plants and reuse that to extinction. So can you please describe what the potential for injury is for in-stream flow rights that don't appear to be anywhere near this?
The potential for injury is that the application, and we're assuming the decree, will provide for leases to unknown water users in unknown locations that potentially are in stream flow reaches upstream of where these return flows were quantified. We are working with these applicants, on similar issues in other cases and are close on negotiating a protective term and condition that we could use in all of the cases. So they are not pushing back and not willing to, they're willing to negotiate with us on a term and condition.
And what was the, I guess, specific claim that they made in their application that that brought up this concern?
That applicant expressly reserves its right to lease excess reusable municipal flow credits, if any, to third parties. And there is no indication of the location or the identity of those third parties or the location of potential use.
Are there any additional questions for Linda? Director Yan?
Thanks, Linda. We're in other cases with Fort Collins, Loveland, is that what you said?
Yes.
And we're working on that language in those cases as well, okay? So I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 1B. Consent agenda item 1B.
It's been moved by Director Yan and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on consent agenda item 1B. Is there any discussion? Director Trick? No. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Consent agenda item 1C is case number 19 CW 3012, application of Double RL Company. This is an application for change of water rights to both correct decreed points of diversion that are incorrect and for alternate points of diversion. The CWCB staff filed a statement of opposition because of potential injury to the Dallas Creek in-stream flow right, which is downstream from these points of diversion, to protect against a potential expansion of use and also different timing of maintenance of historic return flows. And staff recommends that the board ratify this statement of opposition.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any questions for Linda? Director Trick?
At the time of this memo, it stated that we were the only objectors. Are there any other objectors in the case now, as you're aware of?
I don't believe there are, and I'm pretty sure that when we put this memo together, the deadline had passed for filing statements of opposition.
Okay. Are there any additional questions for Linda? Director Anderson?
Linda, you talk about expansion to use, but what it appears from the map to me is they're just moving the points of diversion. Have they increased their?
When they are seeking an alternate point of diversion, and when they do that, the court requires them to do a historical consumptive use analysis. And we typically ask that if they're going to divert at the alternate point of diversion, it has to match water that's physically and legally available. It's a standard concern in a change of water right case to protect against expansion of use. We don't have any, there wasn't something in the application that raised a big alarm bell, but it's pretty much a standard concern that we and other water rights holders have in change of water rights cases.
Thanks, Linda. As a side note, double RL, the RL is Ralph Lauren. I don't know whether anybody's aware of that, but he bought Marie Scott, who was a landmark in Dallas Creek, bought her property, and he's the owner of this. He does a wonderful job, I might say, of maintaining that ranch the way that Marie Scott had it set up. With that, I would make a motion that we approve your recommendations on consent agenda item 1C.
It's been moved by Director Anderson and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on consent agenda item 1C. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Linda. All right, we are on to agenda item 26 with the WSRF grant applications.
That happens.
Craig.
Okay. Great.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Craig Gabu, CWCB staff. I'll be presenting agenda items 26A through D, and Ben Wade will be presenting agenda items 26E through H. This is agenda item 26A. It's an informational item. As you recall, the Chris Caskey's, and it's now, that was tabled last meeting, is now agenda item 26B. And the question was whether or not a for-profit entity can be awarded WSRF grants. It was not a formal opinion by the AG's office, but they have advised us that we are on solid ground. That's perfectly acceptable to award those type of entities WSRF grants.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions for Craig on this issue? Director Hawkins?
No questions, but I appreciate you guys getting that advice to make sure we're on solid ground.
Question pops up every once in a while at a round table, so I'll have a pat answer for them now. Thank you.
Great. Let's proceed.
Thank you. This is agenda item 26B. It's an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Delta Brick and Climate Company for the project titled Chemical Water Production via Methane mitigation. The purpose of this application is to assist the Delta Brick and Climate Company Limited to partner with Vessels Coal Gas LLC to produce a new source of water in the North Fork of the Gunnison River Basin. Vessels Coal Gas produces greenhouse gas offsets and electricity from coal mine methane, converting methane and oxygen into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. The aforementioned water is created chemically and would not otherwise exist. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, and the water can be thought of as a natural occurring byproduct of methane destruction. The water is currently vented as vapor, and only a tiny fraction returns to the watershed as precipitation. The proposed water activity is the condensation of this steam into a new water source. Gunnison Basin Roundtable funds will be used for engineering design, purchase, and installation of a pilot condensation apparatus. Successful testing of this pilot apparatus would result in additional combustion of gas that is currently venting. No additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, Anna Moss will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $18,000 from the Gunnison Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Chris Caskey, founder of Delta Brick and Climate Company, is in attendance today, and we're both available to take questions or address any concerns you may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to add to the board? Please state your name.
This is Chris Caskey. Thank you, Madam Chair and the board. I'll simply state for the record that Vessels Coal Gas has changed their name to Vessels Carbon Solutions.
Great. Thank you for that update. Are there any questions for Chris or Craig? Director Anderson?
Chris, I personally admire your efforts here. You definitely think outside the box.
Outside the bricks.
We're now manufacturing water, and we're going to manufacture bricks to deal with the sediment problem in Paonia Reservoir. And I salute your thinking, and I hope that it all works out for the best for you. And with that, I would make a motion to approve staff's recommendations on item 26B.
Great. It's been moved by Director Anderson and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on item 26B. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is agenda item 26C. It's an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is Trout Unlimited for the project titled Cimarron Canal Diversion Gate Replacement and Water Management Planning Project. The purpose of this application is to assist Trout Unlimited, Bostwick Park Water Conservation District, and the Cimarron Canal Company replace a degraded diversion head gate, provide connectivity to an existing SCADA system, allowing for automatic and remote controls, and provide water management planning and engineering that will direct the operations of the gate. The proposed project will automate releases to the river at the diversion and create a planning model that Bostwick Park and others can follow to maintain flows in the river and provide a variety of flow regimes. The automation will also reduce time and travel costs associated with the management of the diversion. The applicant needs to provide several letters of matching commitment. Otherwise, no additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, I will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $11,500 from the Gunnison Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Carrie Dennison from Trout Unlimited and the Gunnison Basin Roundtable is in attendance today, and we're both available to take questions or address any concerns you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Carrie, thanks for being here. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, ma'am.
Great. Are there any questions for Craig or for Carrie about this project?
Gary, you made the trip. I might ask you a question. It's my understanding, and for those that don't know, Carrie's brother is the ditch rider on this canal, and last year during the drought between the two of them, they managed to come up with a way of keeping some flows in the Cimarron, and I salute your efforts there. And it's my understanding that this project will alleviate the babysitting in the future if we should get there.
That is correct, Director Anderson. For the record, Carrie Dennison, Trout Unlimited, and members of the board. Last year during the drought, We had a significant issue trying to keep water in the creek below the diversion. In rough numbers, the creek had 100 CFS in it. 95 were going to the Cimarron Canal, and there's a CWCB in-stream flow rate for 25. We determined that we needed about 14 to keep the creek from really falling apart. This goes through the CWC, or the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Cimarron State Wildlife Area, a very valuable stretch of river. It would have been a shame to see it die, but in order to keep that creek flowing, we had to drain Silverjack Reservoir, drain Dead Pool out of Silverjack Reservoir, and bypass it through the Cimarron Canal headgate. The diversion works doesn't function. It's an old radial gate that's broken. So it took me manually measuring the stream, setting benchmarks, my brother releasing water out of the reservoir and then out of the canal, and doing this time and time again until we kind of figured out how we could get it right. CPW worked with us the whole way, but it was a lot of labor, a lot of driving, a lot of time. And then we realized if we just had the right head gate and SCADA configuration at the Cimarron Canal diversion, we could do this remotely. And we could also plan for different types of water years, so that if we know we have a big water year, how long do we leave the gate open? Bad water years, do we have to start pulling storage water to keep the creek healthy? So hopefully this project will be a step in the right direction and keep my brother and I from getting in fistfights on the ditch.
Maybe at least not about this issue.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Director Anderson.
Thanks, Carrie. I salute your efforts here and would recommend approval of staff recommendations on item 26C.
It's been moved by Director Anderson and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on item 26C. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is agenda item 26D. It is an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Nature Conservancy for the project titled Maple Ditch Diversion, Structure Rehabilitation, and Headgate Modernization. The purpose of this application is to assist the Nature Conservancy develop final engineering and construction documents for the Maple Ditch Headgate replacement and diversion structure improvement. A recent analysis based on publicly available data assessed the Maple Ditch diversion as one of the least efficient in the area. The Maple Ditch annual diversions through the canal are approximately 20,000 acre feet per year with an irrigation water requirement of 1,800 acre feet. The canal provides water for 18 users and approximately 1,100 acres of high elevation hay fields, the predominant irrigated crop in the region. Project partners have identified several priority projects to improve the operational efficiency of the canal, including canal lining, new check structures, automated waste gate, and new head gate. The project partners have already made significant investments since 2016, which include lining the ditch, automating the waste gate, and constructing new check structures. The diversion structure needs improvement to provide boater safety and allow fish passage of native fish, including the 4 species of native fish at low flows. The applicant needs to provide several letters of matching commitment. Otherwise, no additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, Alec Funk will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $73,000 from the Yampa White Green Basin account, and staff recommends approval. I don't know if the applicant is in the audience. Evidently not, so I will try to answer your questions the best of my ability. Thank you.
Just for the record, Director Hawkins, by virtue of her employment relationship with the Nature Conservancy, has recused herself from this matter and left the room.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions for Craig about this project? Director Brown?
Thank you, Craig. The applicant is not here because we were told that they don't need to come up. Otherwise, they would have been here. And I know they're listening, so hello. And as I mentioned before, this is an excellent project. Thank you for your work on it, Craig. And I would make a motion to move staff recommendation on this project.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on item 26D. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is agenda item 26E. It is an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Upper Walker Ditch Company for the project titled Walker Ditch Headgate Replacement. The purpose of this application is to assist the Upper Walker Ditch Company replace a major diversion headgate and flood control structure serving the Walker Ditch located on the Yampa River 3 miles east of Hayden, Colorado. The existing headgate was constructed in approximately 1940 after the river migrated north away from the original 1890 location. In the spring of 2016, the 1940 headgate collapsed and had to be removed from service. Since then, the ditch has been open and free-flowing, and flood control has been accomplished by temporary gravel structure when needed. Ditch measurement and control has continued with the operation of the original 1890 headgate that was reconstructed in the mid-2000s, which is located at the original diversion site. Concurrent and anticipated future operations continues to include a spill channel for undiverted and floodwater to go back to the river. Project components include design, engineering, and construction. No additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, I will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $62,220 from the Yampa White Green Basin account, and staff recommends approval. The applicant is not here, but I'm here to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions for Craig? Director Brown.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks again for your work with the applicant on this. And I will move staff recommendation of the $62,222.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 26E. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'm sorry for not advancing the PowerPoints. So I'll cue you up, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for all your work in helping with these projects.
Good morning. For the record, Ben Wade, CWCB staff, presenting agenda item 26F through H, and pitch hitting for Megan, so hopefully I do her proud. Agenda item 26F is a request for $17,110 from the Colorado Basin account to support development of the Blue River Integrated Water Management Plan, which is led by Trout Unlimited and the Blue River Watershed Group. The long-term goal of the Integrated Water Management Plan, which is in Summit and Grand counties, is to understand and quantify current and future consumptive and non-consumptive water users to use and integrate those uses for the maximum benefit of all users on approximately 19 miles of stream. They have two primary objectives in this scope of work for this grant request. The first one is to work in parallel with the Blue River Enhancement Work Group to understand the reasons for the declining Blue River trout fishery. And the second objective is to compile current research management plans and stakeholder input, which will inform phase 2 of this project. They have met all their match requirements, and staff recommends approval. Chris Sturm will serve as a project manager. This is also in connection with a water plan grant that we'll hear after lunch that Chris Sturm will be presenting. With us in the audience is Richard Van Geitenbeek with Trout Unlimited, and he'll be here to answer any questions or make any comments, and we'll invite Richard up.
Thanks, Ben. Richard, thanks for being here. If you'll state your name, please.
My name is Richard Van Geitenbeek. I work for Trout Unlimited. Madam Chair and the members of the board. Just a couple of things. We've been working on this project probably since about this time last year. We now have a stakeholder list that runs the gamut of consumptive and non-consumptive users within the Blue River Basin and parts of Grand County. That's approaching 100 entities, people, and organizations. So I think we've been listening in the basin, and that's how we developed our two objectives. I think everyone's pretty excited, and we're hoping that you'll positively consider these grants. This is one of 4. One has already been approved at the January meeting, and 3 are being considered today. So without taking any more of your time, I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions for Ben or for Richard? Okay, let's go. Director Jan.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for bringing this to us. A lot of partners, which we like, and a lot of engagement, so that's all good. So with that, I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 26F.
It's been moved by Director Jan and seconded by Director Brown to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 26F. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to agenda item 26G. And this is a request for $25,000 from the Colorado Basin account to support Eagle Vale Metropolitan District develop phase 1 of their Stone Creek Master Plan. Phase 1 is a 270-foot section of Stone Creek that will remove man-made dams, create a terrace channel connected to the floodplain, improve water quality, install fish habitat and stream stabilization structures, provide fish passage, decrease channel width and increase channel depth, and stabilize the creek banks. So the costs for this project include design fees, permitting, construction, project management fees. Ultimate goal of the master plan after implementation is to leave Stone Creek as stabilized, self-sustaining, and a holistic ecosystem requiring minimal maintenance and with a flourishing aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem. They have met all the match requirements and staff recommends approval. Megan Holcomb will serve as a project manager if approved. In the audience today is Brent Barnum. He is a superintendent of golf courses and parks with Eagle Vale Metropolitan District, and we'll invite him up for any comments and questions.
Thanks, Ben. Brent, thanks for being here. If you'll state your name and who you're with.
Yep, Brent Barnum with the Eagle Vale Metropolitan District in Avon, Colorado.
Does anyone have any questions for Brent? Is there anything you'd like to add about the project?
No, just thank you very much for the consideration.
Okay. Director Goebel?
If there's no further discussion, I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 26G.
It's been moved by Director Goebel and seconded by Director Jan to approve staff recommendation on item 26G. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ben, before you get going on the next item, I did want to disclose that I am a volunteer board member for the applicant for the next project. I have no financial interest or gain from this project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, agenda item 26H is a request for $28,000 from the Rio Grande Basin account to support development of the Rio Grande, Conejos River, and Sawatch Creek stream management plans. That is a mouthful. The Rio Grande Basin Roundtable Stream Management Committee has prioritized 3 reaches as noted in the summary that you have in your board packets. Developed a project scope of work and committed to assisting the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project, which is the applicant, in a technical advisory team capacity. The technical advisory team will guide the stream management plan process, include partners from water user groups, local environmental and recreational interests, state and federal agencies. These requested WSRF funds will support stakeholder engagement and quantifying the flow recommendations, preparing the final stream management plan report and grant management. This process will result in the development of recommendations to improve flows and physical conditions of priority streams for environmental, recreational, and community benefits. The applicant has provided the necessary match. Staff recommends approval. Chris Sturm will again serve as a project manager. And with us in the audience is Emma Reeser, who is Executive Director of the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. I'd like to invite her up for any comments and questions.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Emma, for being here. Please state your name.
My name's Emma Reeser. I'm the director of the Restoration Project. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to thank CWCB for your support of stream management plans across the state and in the Rio Grande Basin. Really incredible effort around the Rio Grande Basin, bringing so many stakeholders together, and the data and discussions will result in priority projects and recommendations that improve the health and of the streams on the Rio Grande, Canals, and Saguache Creek. So it's really exciting. And I want to give a special shout out to Chris Sturm because he's been super helpful throughout this whole process. We have lots of questions because it's a big project, and he's been there every step of the way. And also wanted to thank Katie Birch and CPW for their help. Katie came down and gave us a training on R2 Cross and is helping us with the aquatic habitat assessment piece. So lots of support from the state, and we couldn't do it without that. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Emma. Are there any questions for Ben or Emma? Director Yon?
Yeah, thanks, Emma, for bringing. Thank you, Ben. And this is another one of those where you have a lot of partners in this, and one of them's a Water Smart grant, so that's cool as well. So well done for getting a lot of people involved, and it's nice to see a wide variety of entities that have joined you in this effort. So with that, I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 26H.
It's been moved by Director Yon and seconded by Director Gopal to approve staff recommendation on 26H. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Craig. Looks like we are on to agenda item 27, which is our water plan update. Greg and John, welcome. John, Russ, Greg Johnson, Russ Sands, thank you.
I answered anything, it's all right. Russ Sands, CWCB staff. Well, thanks for making time for us. We are in the home stretch with the technical update, and so we wanted to give you a little bit of the status of where we're at today. We had a great all cheers call, so I'll kind of be walking through a little bit of that. So we just want to touch on implementation, the kind of general timeline for the update, and then kind of where we're at with the working group, the implementation working group, and the outputs from that. So just on implementation, we continue to hear that we get kind of pushback on what's happening with the water plan, is implementation happening? And I just wanted to kind of revisit implementation in the water plan. If you look at, the chapter 10 section, when we go through the critical actions, it's really clear that a lot of that is about planning. In fact, the critical action types that are called out include process, programmatic, legislative, policy, and funding action. So we were very much working on the water plan every day in everything we do. And of course, projects are equal part of that, but that's it. Planning is about implementation and projects. So we've shown this quite a bit, this chapter 11 table that kind of sets up these targets for when we'll update first the technical update, or SWASI is how it's referred to there, and then the BIPs, and then ultimately the water plan itself. And for us, the targets that are in here are just as important as all the targets in the water plan. So we continue to push forward and drive this. So in terms of driving things and just kind of funding progress, 86%, as we said, I think at our last presentation, we showed that table of kind of our funding over the last 3 fiscal years. 86% of that funding has gone to projects. And so we are absolutely focused on that. And that's helped us achieve these, 67% of the progress on the critical actions in the water plan. But 14% of that funding is going to planning implementation as well. So on that, we want to thank the board again. I think it was last November meeting, we got approval to kind of move forward with this $5.5 million request to fund the BIP updates and the water plan update over the next 4 years. And that was just approved in the projects bill. So we're excited to get that funding and move forward. And as promised, we're staying true to what we said and trying to supply about 65% of that average cost of the initial BIPs in this funding package that would go back to working with the roundtables to update the BIPs and really provide that support that we've heard quite a bit of feedback on of just, we're volunteer staff at the roundtables. We need support. This is, a big lift, and we'd like to do it, but we'd like some help too. I wanted to touch a little bit on just kind of how we compare to other states. This really cool document that some of the members on our team helped contribute to as well. But this report documents 16 other states, including ours, that have water plans and compares Colorado. So as you can see, if we just look at, I just pulled out a few of the facts in here, but if you look at annual planning budgets and annual water plan budgets for funding the water plan in each state, you can see that on average, the states spend quite a bit, anywhere from $500,000 to $400 million each year on water plan efforts. About $2 million is the average, and where we're at with this $5.5 million request, if you break that over the 4 years, we are about 1.4, which puts us just below the average cost of what states are spending. Another thing I thought would be helpful is just looking at the average time update. We've gotten some pushback, and of course, we're part of planning as you do have planning fatigue, and we're certainly working on a number of things. But just to kind of get a little bit of ground truthing of our updates and how fast we're doing them or where we're at, it looks like we're right in the pocket of all the states. So if you kind of look at where the states are at, you'll see timelines that go out to 25 years, and then more commonly every 5 years doing some sort of update. That puts the average around 7 years, and that's right where we're at when we're tracking our current plan to track with the water plan goal of initiating the actual water plan update in 2020, and we're aiming to have that done in 2022. So if we kind of start the cycle with SWASI or the technical analysis beginning in 2015, that puts us on a 7-year update cycle. So again, we're rebranding, we're packaging all these things together because these things go together. The 7-year cycle is inclusive of the technical update, the BIPs, and the water plan itself. So we're looking at this comprehensively and really looking at this as kind of the first in an iterative step where we'll work with the roundtables to refine what we've done and through the BIPs to potentially even change some of the outputs and ultimately roll that all up into the water plan. As a reminder, if you'd like any kind of current status updates of where things are at, we are doing these technical webinars, and we've been recording them. Megan Holcomb on our staff's been great about getting these up online. But I'll call your attention to, we do have an upcoming one this next week on environmental data and methodologies. We'll talk a little bit about the flow tool that's been developed and the environmental and recreation database. And then we just have one more, and then we're kind of almost through to the end here. Also on the Roundtable Summit, I know the last time we attended, we talked a little bit about this. We're going to send out an email this next week just talking about lodging. So we've got room block rates now. We'll send that out. But also Director Dutton had mentioned that she was kind of curious if we'd have any grants available. So we wanted to follow up on that. And we announced this at our all chairs call, but we did want to stay true to that process and provide some form of assistance back to the roundtables to pay for lodging, food, travel. So we've basically allocated $18,000 to go back across the roundtables, and we've kind of split that out based on the distance from the roundtable meeting to the Headwater Center in Winter Park. And so we have talked with all chairs about how that will be distributed, and then each roundtable can request reimbursement for that through Viola. Or through Elgin, maybe. Elgin only, apparently. And then we also, just in terms of being true to that grant concept, also wanted to make available, we're really trying to focus this event on the BIP updates, but also recognize that it's a good opportunity for students that maybe want to get involved in the process. And so we're opening up 2 slots for each basin where we'll waive registration for those attendees too. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg Johnson to talk about kind of the timeline of where we've been, where we're headed.
Thanks, Russ. Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. So Russ did an excellent job kind of summarizing everything that we're doing with this process. I just wanted to give you a little more detail where we've been the last couple of years and where we're going. Primarily because we have a lot in the mix right now. We've been talking a lot with roundtable members, and we keep getting a lot of questions about some of the the details of how all this stuff fits together. So we want to make sure that this all makes sense for you all. So we did initiate the updates to the basin plans in 2018. We had a working group kickoff that was held in December of last year. So this was kind of built on the heels of some survey work that we did that we kicked off in August of last year at Water Congress. It's really to kind of gauge what the expectations were, where we should really go with this whole update process. And then we've continued to dive into that throughout this year. So we've been meeting monthly. The implementation working group is our little subcommittee. So we've got a handful of members from each of the roundtables to really look at what we should do when we update these things moving forward. So we will conclude that this July. We're extremely excited to be releasing the technical analysis and update to the water plan at the meeting 2 months from now. We will be having a joint meeting with the IBCC at the end of the board meeting, so it'll be July 18th. I don't think we've solidified exactly yet where that meeting will be, but we're working on the details, and we'll hope to have as many of the IBCC members as we can get there. We have sent out a save the date for that. So long term, where are we headed with all of this? One of the things that we've heard from the implementation working group is that we need to provide as much detail as possible. And we understand that people need to know, again, exactly where we're going with this, albeit, things are still fluid, as we step into this process. So for the next couple of years, we will be looking at more of a hard launch at that Colorado 9 Summit, that C9 Summit, the 9 roundtables in September of this year, so September 25th and 26th. We are working on a draft RFP to really get that package of funding out there for the general contractor and then the local basin experts to really update all of the basin plans and then intimately work with the water plan update at the same time. So things will be staggered somewhat. We'll really dive into more of the details on the basin plans, starting as soon as we can get those contractors on board. Ideally by the end of this calendar year, starting in earnest in January of next year to really update the project data. That's really the first order of business, is to get better project information, especially costing information, particularly because of a lot of the funding conversations that are occurring. We want to make sure that we do our homework and get that information as soon as we can. And then really 2020, 2021 will be the bigger process to really update the planets, the basin plans themselves. And then again, working concurrently on updating the water plan. We will be working with stakeholder groups, with the roundtables, with you all, of course, with the IBCC, as we update the water plan, looking at things like metrics, like those critical actions, the measurable objectives, and really diving back into everything, making sure that it still makes sense, that we have the data to be tracking what we need to be tracking, and that we are doing so appropriately. So we look forward to those conversations. So again, as I said, we are working to have that RFP out as soon as possible. We're working on drafts of that right now. And we will be inviting chairs, basin roundtable chairs, to be a part of the selection committee for this big RFP, to really provide input on the whole package, but especially on their local experts. This is one thing that we discussed at the Basin Roundtable chairs call. We have an all chairs call periodically. We had a call, I think it was just last week. And we discussed this concept and put out a call for them to get us some initial feedback on who they think some of those potential local experts might be, local consulting firms, folks that may or may not have worked on the Basin Roundtable plans in the past, but just trying to get that comprehensive list as we look to get that RFP out and make sure that we're aware of notifying the people that need to be notified. So those local experts will be working really as the chief integrators, at the basin level. We'll have a general contractor that will really help provide, a lot of the firepower, a lot of the technical support. But then we really see those local basin contractors as helping to integrate all of this at the basin level, working more closely with the basin roundtables, with all the members to really help take some of the load off. Because again, that's one of the things we've been hearing is that there is some planning fatigue. We understand, we don't want to make sure that, that people are having endless meetings. So we want to provide that as much support as possible. And there's a lot of nuance here. So of course, as we get into the contracting process, we have no idea who will be selected. It's possible that whatever engineering firm is selected may also potentially be an expert locally. There's a lot of different ways that this could go, but we're just trying to build in that flexibility, really work with our contracting folks in the accounting office for Department of Natural Resources ahead of time to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. That being said, we understand that there are inevitably bumps in the road. Contracting takes time, so we're trying to make sure we have a realistic timeline with all of this. I'm going to discuss a little bit of the outputs from this implementation working group. I wanted to give a quick thank you to all of the folks who have participated in this. This is a list here on this slide of the majority of those folks, but we have a number of people that have been coming in and out of the process. It's been somewhat fluid, but they have been extremely helpful to provide feedback on some of these initial drafts of where we think we're headed with this basin plan update process. So again, just wanted to thank everyone. One of the things that we've been looking at, again, to the importance of projects and, IPP, the Identified Projects and Processes is our acronym for those, the importance of good project data. Things had been fairly inconsistent as we collected all the basin plan data for the water plan in 2015. This time we really see it as an opportunity to get better data, more consistent data, and again to use the resources from this funding package to bring to bear to really make the calls, get out on the ground, talk to people, get better information on all these different things that are planned. So to that end, we've spent some time going through all of the different basin plans. And really looking at all the bits of data, technically what do we need? What fields can we collect? What should we collect? And then ultimately we will be having a central online, one project database, so that we really see this as a huge tool moving forward, especially for any questions that we get, from anyone, from the general public, but especially from the legislature as they're working on various water issues, from you all, from folks in the basins, that we can have one central place we can point to that's, an updated list instead of, various versions of spreadsheets and things that live and are updated in various different ways as they are now with the Basin Roundtables. So again, a lot of work has gone into really doing a forensic analysis of what's in those basin plans. We were fortunate enough to have a few graduate students this year to help us out with some of this. And then staff's done an excellent job pulling together a couple pages for each roundtable summarizing that. So really kind of a high-level summary of what's in the basin plan for each of the basins, and then correspondingly, what things may need to be updated. On that note, going through all of the basin plans, we see that within each of the plans, roughly a quarter of those plans need to be updated from our analysis so far, various tables and charts and graphs and text and whatnot. And I think it's really important to note too, that about half of the roundtable members have turned over since those first plans were created. So, a lot of the good people who put in a lot of time and effort are still there, but a lot of people have moved on and there's some new faces. And this may influence some potential changes in those, some changes in priorities and focus and whatnot. So we want to be cognizant of some of that turnover. And then also, again, to the project data issue that we'd mentioned before, only about half of the projects that we have kind of on file based on all these different lists actually have cost information. And that's something we think we can improve on for sure. And then about a third of the basin plans actually use some sort of general prioritization, some sort of tiering. This is also something we would like to improve on to really focus the efforts of everything with the water plan to be as productive as we can be, as strategic with the limited resources that we have. I think that's really the thrust, one of the main thrusts of the water plan, is to be responsible with the resources that we're given. So we're really trying to look at how we can do this. We know this is extremely difficult. Anytime you try to rank anything, anytime you even mutter the word prioritization at a roundtable, it can be tricky. So we certainly understand it's complicated, but we have been working with this group, with the implementation working group, on a draft project tier matrix. So this is, again, very rough draft, but just conceptually looking at, okay, if we did tier projects into a few different categories, how would we do so? And how would we actually rank those things? So this is something that we've gotten some good input from the committee so far, and then look forward again to working with all the roundtables. None of this, of course, is set in stone. This is something we really need to keep the discussion going on. So I think there's been some concerns from the working group that, we'll end this in June and then that will be kind of the final blessing and we'll move on. That's not the case. There are still kind of a lot of different discussions to be had to this end, but I think there's some good work and I think we're headed in the right direction on that. Also, as far as what that assignment is, how we will be updating those basin plans. If you remember last time, we had a 9-page document, I believe, that was the BIP guidance document that really said, thou shalt do this basin plan. It shall have these different chapters, and address these different things. This time, we're trying to make sure that we provide enough of that framework, but also have flexibility. Of course, we have the existing plans. We have a draft, just a 2-page document that's really kind of that overview framework of where we see this going. This was another thing that we've been working with the implementation working group to get feedback on, to really kind of set out generally where we see this process going. And then another thing, of course, that underlies all of this is the adaptive planning framework. That's really the kind of the foundation of the technical update that we will be releasing. And a part of that adaptive planning, of course, is as you move forward into the future, you have signposts. The whole point is to really see where you are as far as some of these potential future scenarios, and to ideally execute core strategies, what we had referred to before as no and low regrets. So all of those action items that are really kind of one of the fundamental aspects of the water plan, again, to make sure that you are implementing those things. So this looks at what could be a 7-year schedule if we stick with this timeline. This is another thing, of course, that we have not agreed to. It's not set in stone exactly what that timeline will be. As Russ had kind of set out what we do as a state, have done in the past. Of course, this has been evolving very much for the state of Colorado, but it's very insightful, of course, to look at what other states are doing as well. And then finally, we are working on recommendations that will be kind of the wrap up to the technical update when we release this in July. This is one of the next items we'll be discussing with that implementation working group. Starting next week, we have 2 more meetings with that group, just like we have with the different webinars for the technical update that Russ had mentioned. So one of those have always been on the same day. So next Tuesday, we have the next meeting of the implementation working group. We'll be diving into kind of the draft recommendations, what will be some of those things moving forward from the technical update with the data, kind of how you use that data, what it all means. And we really hope to get some good feedback on that. And of course, we want this, as we go along with all of this, to be a very interactive and inclusive process. Just wanted to remind everyone, all of this is online. I think Russ had already put that out there, but we do have a page on the water plan website. It's a little easier to work with technically, so we've been using the water plan website instead of the CWCB website, which, by the way, others have mentioned, we are updating, so we're excited about that as well. But we have all of the different materials that we posted. That matrix is up there. The recordings of each of those webinars are up there, and other presentations like this we've been trying to put up there as well, so to make sure everything's available. I think that's it. We're happy to answer any questions and have a discussion about this.
Thank you, Greg. Director Hawkins?
Thanks. Thanks, Greg. I'm interested in the matrix that's going to be used for consolidating all the projects. Is there going to be a plan for sort of regular updating of that, and is that going to be done through the roundtables?
Good question. This is some of the discussion we've had with the working group. So the intent with a matrix like that is really to build it into the database that we will eventually have online. So in other words, when you input a project, you will be selecting answers to each of those questions in the matrix. And then that will basically self-select with whether that project is tier 1, 2, or 3. So in other words, the point is to take away some of that decision-making process from anyone. I mean, this is not something that staff wants to be doing, is saying whether something is tier 1, 2, or 3, and certainly we don't want to put more of a burden on the roundtables to have another committee to really be picking kind of what should be tier 1 or tier 2, and we want this to be as objective as possible is the intent. So that's some of that more detailed conversation that we've been having with the working group. But
I guess the other thing that I was thinking about is that the IPP lists get stale over time, and so there's going to be these updates that we do, but we also see new IPPs coming in to the roundtable, and so is there going to be a process, and is the roundtable going to be responsible for getting those into the matrix?
Good question, Director Hawkins. The intent, I think, once we have that online database, is to have it be, forever updated and fluid. And so you could add a project at any time. I think there will be, probably with our process, periodic pushes to maybe renew things if we know there's been a lot of activity, a lot of potential projects brewing with the roundtables. I think realistically, it's safe to say that there will be, certainly a huge push through this whole basin plan update process, to get everything in there. Certainly one of the first steps would be going back through the lists that all the basins have and making sure that information is updated and relevant. And then, of course, any new projects. So that there will be a huge push in the next couple of years to do that. But then we really see this, being an online tool, like a lot of the other online tools that we have, like the map viewers and whatnot, being kind of a living list, living database. And ideally, I think it will take some herding, once, you hear about things that may or may not be on the list. I think that the roundtables are a wonderful, wonderful resource, but there are certainly entities and people and projects that are outside of that world. So I think we always need to be cognizant of what's going on in different corners of the basin that we may not be as aware of, and try to be as inclusive as we can be with all these things.
Yeah. So then we have to go through an internal intake process, we call it, where we start to kind of scope out any tech project that we're going to work on in CWCB or at the state for that matter. And that's been really helpful in just thinking about like the level of users and how many users we might have. So as Greg said, we might have users from across the state, but we also recognize that just like within CWCB, there may be power users that have different levels of authority, that may also be true at the roundtable level. So we're starting to think about that process and say, does it make sense, for example, for roundtable chair, for certain types of grants that would come in, roundtable chair, maybe treasurer and recorder, to have that power user access to be able to get reminders, for example, or if a new project comes on, to even use that as a tool for here's the projects that are going to be coming to my roundtable potentially, or these haven't been touched in a year, do they need to be updated? So there may be some ways that we can build into the workflow a process that helps keep those fresher.
Thanks. I think that it is important for us to think about that because it takes work on the local and roundtable end to sort of keep refreshing and help suss out these projects. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Goebel.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation. And, this has been a huge lift. And I think you guys are doing a great job. And I know it slows it down whenever you reach out to stakeholders and have these working groups and all that. But I think that's important. And so I appreciate that. And then also, going forward, if we're able to secure more funding for implementation of the water plan, all of this work will, set us up nicely to see that through. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Director Goebel.
Director Anderson.
I too want to salute you guys for your efforts. Being an engineer by training, the planning and design was not the limelight. The limelight was going out and building it, and somebody has to do this task, and I really do salute your efforts and your attitude to develop the data and plans going forward. I really do salute. One quick question. I was hopeful that you've had a good response to your webinars. Do you have a sense of what you're seeing attendance-wise there and interest?
That's a good question. So for the working group itself, we've got 25, 30 people or so that we've had on each of those. And we understand, people are busy and sometimes different roundtables will bring in somebody else or tag team or whatnot. For the technical webinars, those have varied quite a bit. One of the reasons that we think is causing that is that we have been, every time we've announced that we're having those, we've told people that they're going to be recorded, that it will be an online resource. So we're not sure how many people are actually putting that on their calendars to attend and how many people will then be hitting it up later. So we're also trying to go back and look at some of those statistics of how many people are actually looking at it. But the last couple, I believe, we were hovering around 50 or 60. The first couple were much lower, were maybe 15, 20, 30 people. So our numbers have been climbing. I think maybe as people become more aware of where we're headed and what we're doing and the fact that this is actually coming out in the next couple of months. So so I think there's been fairly good reception, but it hasn't gone viral yet, for better or worse.
Don't stop believing, Greg. Thank you for the effort on this. I've been participating in those webinars, and you all are continuing to be very organized and professional. And I think that the way you're laying this out is really logical and well thought out. So thank you for that. And thank you also for responding to my comment last time about providing some assistance so that we can get people to the C9 Summit, so we can have more and diverse people there and have a good conversation. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments for Greg or Russ? Great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. It's some of our favorite parts of the day. Lunch is now, and so we're going to go next door and have lunch in the conference, or this little conference room over here. Let's be back at 12:20. And a quick reminder that lunch is for the board and staff, but we had quite a bit of food left over yesterday. So if you want to hang around and join us after the board and the staff have had a chance to go through the line, you're welcome to see what's left over. Thank you all.